Hello everyone, I am Professor Nenasne, Department of Information Technology, Bharat Mamose College of Engineering, Wagholi, Pune. So in the last session, we have started with the access layer designing. So the next point to the access layer designing is your table class mapping. As we have seen, we are mapping the table, the database, the relational database into the object-oriented classes or the object-oriented objects. So there we also seen that we need something tool that will be map the relational database with your object oriented constraints. So the next thing is the table class mapping. So the tool to map the relational data with the object should have the following mapping capabilities. Now the tool should always map the different things, the different constraints. The first thing the table should map or the tool should map is the table class mapping. That means the data from the table in the form of rows and columns is mapped to the appropriate class object and their attributes. So depend on the object attribute, the table column value will be retrieved. So that is also called as the table class mapping. Second is table multiple classes mapping. So from one table you are mapping the different classes. So different classes can point to the same table. They can access the property of the table. The properties are in the form of column. So the next one is table inherited class mapping. That means the number of different two classes can have the same superclass. Okay, so that mapping is there. And tables inherited class mapping, that means multiple table with the multiple different classes mapping. So this thing should be have in your tool, whichever you are choosing for your relational database mapping with your object oriented designing. So the tool must describe how the foreign key can be used to navigate among the classes. So your foreign key should be moved from one class to another, and the instance, so it is mapped in the object model. So however, the referential integrity is also maintained while you are mapping your relational database with your classes. So another important point is your referential integrity that should be maintained in the tool that we are using for mapping the relational data with the objects. So we'll see one by one the different mandatory things which is needed by the tool to map. So it is a simple one-to-one mapping of a table to a class and the mapping of the columns in a table to the properties in the class. So whatever columns are there, attributes are there of the table that are mapped with the properties or the attributes of your objects. So here we map in this one-to-one mapping, we map all the column properties to your object or your object property. So here each row in a table represent an object instance and the column represent the attributes. So in a table we are putting the rows as a different object, and in column section we are having the properties of that particular object. So this provides a literal translation between the relational data representation and an application object. So the table multiple classes mapping. Now a single table can map the multiple inherited classes, number of inherited classes, or one or more distinct number of inherited classes which have some properties that are mapped to the column to a single database. So at a runtime, map table row is accessed as an instance of the one of the classes based upon the column value of that table. So at the runtime what happens, the table row is accessed as an instance. So the table row will act as an object which will be accessed depend on the whatever value we are retrieving, whatever value of that object or whatever value, properties of that object we are retrieving from the column value. So as we have seen, the rows represent the different instances of that class. That means different object of that class, and your column will represent the different attributes, different values of that object. So the next is table inherited class mapping. That means a single table can map to multiple classes that have common superclass. That inherited word is there. Inheritance is nothing but having one class can have the same property as its parent class. Okay, so many classes may have the same superclass, so we can map a single table to the different number of classes which are having the common superclass. So this mapping allows user to specify the column to be shared among the related classes. That means you can share the properties of your parent to your different children's, same as the mapping of the user to the specified column can be shared to the different related classes, related in form of inherited. So these different related classes is a relationship. That means your inheritance is applied here. The superclass may be abstract or instantiated. So that is not fixed. Either it may be abstract, means it doesn't contain any definition or any method functioning, or it may be instantiate. The next is table inherited class mapping. Tables inherited class mapping. This mapping allows the translation of is a relationship that exists among the tables. So there are the number of tables in a relational schema into the inherited classes. That means number of tables which are related to each other with the inherited relationship from the object oriented. That means number of tables with the number of different inherited classes. So this object model, in the object model, the relational database is a relationship is often modeled as a primary key that acts as a foreign key to another table that we know. In the object model is a term, is the another term which is represented as the inheritance relationship. So the keys for the instance navigation. So this is a relationship is the key for your navigation among the classes. So the different tables are mapped with the different inherited classes. Then the concept is the multi-databases system, as it is a heterogeneous database system. So your data can be stored in a different sources in a different databases. So a different approach for integration object oriented application with the relational data environment is the multi-database system, or we can say the heterogeneous database system, which facilitate the integration of the heterogeneous databases which are located at the different locations and the other information sources. So the heterogeneous information system facilitated the integration of the heterogeneous information sources where they can be structured or they can be semi-structured, even unstructured with the different places. So we are dealing with databases which are stored at the different locations, which is heterogeneous. We doesn't know the source where it comes from when the query is fired. So that information, that database need to be handled while you are using the tool. The next is you are designing a access layer classes. Now the main idea behind creating an access layer is to create a set of classes that know how to communicate between the different places. Now different places means from the user request to the database. So regardless of what data resides and whatever the files they are having, whatever the relational database is there, whatever different schemas in the relational database, what is the mainframe, internet, DOM or the ORB, the access layer classes must be able to translate a data related request from the business layer into the appropriate protocol for the data access. Now what the access layer does, it translates the request which comes from the user. So the data request always come from the user, from the web browser and from within the proper protocol. So your business layer data request is get transferred with the proper protocol to the data access layer. Okay, that means your database layer. So this is done under the access layer. So the main object or the main motto behind designing the access layer is to transfer the user request in the proper protocol to your data access layer. So the access layer main responsibility is to provide the link between your business view objects and the data storage. As we have seen the 3-layer architecture of your computer system, in same as the view layer corresponds to the client tier. That means it is a user interface, it may be a user browser, and the business layer to the application service tier. That means it lies it lands in between the view layer and the database layer. So there are two main objects or motto behind designing the access layer classes. The first one is translate the request. That means the access layer must be able to translate any data request which comes from the business layer, which indirectly comes from the end user with the proper URL, or we can say the web browser, which comes from the web browser with the proper protocol, okay, for accessing a particular data. So translate that request to the database layer and translate the result. So the results whichever generated from the data layer, so that need to be transmitted to the user. So two communication phases the access layer handles. First, getting the request from the user and transferring to the business layer. From the business layer it will again transfer to the view layer or the business layer. Okay. So first one is translate the request, second is the translate the result. Whatever the data is requested from the user, request goes to the business layer, request goes to the data layer, and from the data layer whatever the result is there, it will transfer to the business layer. Here the design is tied with any basic engine or the distributed object technology such as the Corba or DCOM which is used. Here we can switch easily from one database to another with no major changes, and the user interface and the business layer object. So we all need to change the access layer classes methods. Whatever we need to change is the access layer classes method. So I hope you understood the access layer designing, what main object behind the access layer is. So in a simple word, the access layer designing classes or the access layer's motto is to translate the request from the user to the data, and whatever data is required by that request, put it into the proper form and send back to the user. So this thing is done by your access layer. So if you have any doubt, you can comment in comment section. Further part will continue with the next session. Thank you.